Hi, welcome to the video on naming ionic compounds from their chemical formula. So in this video, we're going to start with chemical formulas. These are all examples of chemical formulas. They tell you what types of atoms you have in a molecule and how many of those atoms that you have. And we're going to go from here to its name. So if you look at the example going from NaSO4 to the name sodium sulfate. All right, so to begin, the first thing you need to do is you need to identify the cation and anion of your from your chemical formula. Remember, the cations are usually metals, or they could be NH4, and the cations are always written first. So to help you with that, just sort of keep track, what I like to do is I like to sort of split, but I use my periodic table as a reference. So the first element I see in our first example, I have Na2O. The first element I see is sodium, or Na, right? So if I don't know the name of it, I can go to my periodic table and find it here. Okay, so that's my metal part. And then the non-metal part is oxygen, or O, and again, I can prove that because here's oxygen on the periodic tables on the non-metal side. Okay. All right, so I've got my metal and non-metal part, and now what I need to do is I need to convert this to a name. So for the first part, the metal or the cation part, remember our metals are cations usually. Na is sodium, so I'm just going to write that name. It keeps its name. Okay. Now for the non-metal part, the oxygen changes the name, so this goes from oxygen to oxide. Remember, we use the IDE suffix ending, so this will become sodium oxide. Okay, so the more that you hear of these things, the easier it'll be. So just to recap, we identified the cation and anion component. The cation kept its name, so Na is sodium. And then for the anion, because we got it from the periodic table, we have to change the ending to "ide." Let's look at our next example. We're going to do the same thing. So we're looking at our formula here, LiC2H3O2. Notice in this case, I have many more types of elements than I have here. Here I just have only two types, sodium and oxygen, so we call that binary. But here I have many more than two types of elements. So with that being said, once again, I'm going to try and figure out what's my cation part, what's my anion part. First thing I see is Li, which is lithium. Okay, so lithium. So that's my cation part. Go ahead and identify that. I'm just going to highlight that so I know that that's my cation. And that's lithium. So I can go ahead and just write its name down since the cations keep their name. So if they're called lithium in the periodic table or on the polyatomic ion, that's what it will be called. Okay, now we got the rest of it, C2H3O2. Notice that I have more than one type of atom here. So this tells me, since I have more than one type, these are all nonmetals, right? Carbon, oxygen, I have hydrogen over here, which is a nonmetal. Since these are all nonmetals and there's more than one type, that tells me I need to go to my polyatomic ion chart and find its name. Okay, so here's my polyatomic ion chart. All right, and I'm looking for one that starts with carbon. All right, and the first one I see starting here, I see this one, C2H3O2 minus. So let's just make sure that matches, C2H3O2. Okay, that matches, and this is called acetate. So it's lithium, and then the polyatomics also keep their name, acetate. All right, so just to quickly recap, if you have more than one type of nonmetal, go to this polyatomic ion chart. It's on page 2 of the reading, okay? All right, last one. Now in this case, I start off with N, nitrogen, and if I look on my periodic table, I notice that nitrogen is a nonmetal, but I always start with a metal or some sort of cation. So this is my clue that this is my exceptions to the cations being metals. NH4 is on my polyatomic ion list, and it is a cation because it has a positive charge. This is called ammonium. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, this portion here is all together. This is my cation. Okay, this is the only time the cation will, you'll typically see will have more than one element, and it's not found in the periodic table. So this is ammonium. Okay, now I need to do my anion part, what's left is Br. Okay, and if I look on my periodic table, here's Br. It's called bromine. All right, but remember, since it's on the periodic table, I have to change its ending. So this is bromine, but that becomes bromide, the IDE ending. Okay, so ammonium bromide. Now you may be wondering, well, how do you know where to cut it off? Usually it's the last syllable that you cut off from the name. That's typically sort of how it works. The last syllable gets cut off. But with that being said, the more and more you see of these, the more and more you'll recognize where to cut them off. Okay, so that is the example for part 1 when you're going from the chemical formula to the name. Now you have some examples of practice problems to do. You're going to do these practice problems. There's more than these 3. And then you're going to check your answers on the last 3 pages of your packet. That's it for this video. Have a quality day.